Hi, everybody. Welcome inside the Talking Elite Fitness studios as we wrap up the final day of Europe and Asia and the final day of semifinals. Joined now by Lauren Kalil and Tommy Marquez. And just like that, guys, semifinals is over. Next stop, Madison, Wisconsin, and the 2023 Noble CrossFit Games.
Yeah, we tentatively have our individual games field, and 34 of those 80 individuals that have qualified weren't there last year. So we have a pretty high churn rate, about 42.5%. And then you look at those newcomers, 22 are actual individual rookies. So a lot of new faces showing up.
Yeah, and once we get to Madison, there's going to be a lot of blood in the water. It's going to come down to who are the Sharks going to be. But also with some of those rookies, we also have 3 men who are going to the CrossFit Games for their 10th time. So an interesting dynamic that we're going to see once we head there later this summer.
And tentative is the key word there, tentative field, because we all know, test 8. Got to pass that one. Very important. Let's bring in the man who was in Berlin for this entire weekend, taking in the Europe semifinal in person. Brian Friend joins us with his top moment of the day and his big winner for Sunday in Berlin.
Thank you, Sean. Fantastic last day here in Berlin. The crowd brought the energy. The athletes brought the performances, but I'm going to narrow it down to 2. On the female side, the moment of the day for me goes out to Rebecca Wittesen. Awesome performance in the final round of the final test. To jump past 3 women in her heat, take the heat win, second in the test, and punch the final ticket to the CrossFit Games. On the men's side, for me, the winner of the day is Ulda Supanex. He may not have had any wins on the day, but he did have a 6th and a 5th place finish on 2 very different tests to secure his 4th consecutive trip to the CrossFit Games. I think he flies under the radar in terms of top men who are consistent in this sport. It's awesome to see him able to do that on this final day and go back to Madison. It's been a blast doing this with you guys all 3 weeks. Can't wait to see everyone when I get back stateside. Have fun with the rest of the show. See you, Sean.
Thank you, Brian. Well, let's jump into the final day of competition. Only the individuals were in action because remember yesterday we decided what teams were going to go to the CrossFit Games after their 6 tests. We'll start with the women. They had test 6 and test 7 today. And tell me if you heard this before. Laura Horvath finishing strong. Remember the games last year? Won 2 of the final 3 events and had 4 straight finishes inside the top 4. She entered the day in 5th place overall. It took her just 3 minutes in test 6 to get through her 4 seated legless rope climbs and her 20 wall-facing handstand push-ups. She did those in 2 sets, by the way, and got back on her final 3 handstand pirouettes right after that. Horvath was first back to the rower ahead of Annie Thorisdottir. Gabby McGowan is in 3rd. Horvath would have no trouble on the final set of overhead squats. She takes the test win with a time of 10 minutes, 40.27 seconds, moves up to 4th place overall heading into test 7. And in test 7, she picks up right where she left off. She was first off the pull-up bar and proceeded to leave everyone behind her. Horvath had no trouble with the sandbag carries, no shock there. She goes on to grab her 2nd straight win, closes out the final day with a time of 4 minutes, 9.16 seconds, and she is going back to the CrossFit Games. And Lauren, Laura Horvath and Gabby McGowan deserve a ton of credit for what they were able to pull off on the final day.
They truly do. And what makes it even sweeter is that they're not only training partners, but they're also friends. Watching them both cross the finish line, embracing in a hug. I mean, it's incredible to see how these women handled the weekend, specifically the final day. Although Laura was the expected semifinalist winner, I think the way she proved her dominance by 2 event wins in the last day was exactly what we expect to see from Laura. And she did it with a smile on her face. While it's typically those deficit handstand push-ups that give her trouble, I think it's still notable that she breezed through the wall-facing ones in test 6 to ultimately take home the event win by 45 seconds, just 1 second away from that event record. But Laura says she doesn't care about the record, and that every time she had an interview and they would ask about her placement and expectations, that's not something she's focused on. And I think that's the ingredient she needs in the mindset heading into Madison. Looking at Gabby McGowan, the overall event winner, test 6, we expected her to struggle with all that upper body pulling, but she proved myself, maybe many of us wrong, that she has narrowed that gap in her weakness, something that we're expecting to see to prove her higher in the leaderboard once we do get to Madison.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think a lot of us did think that upper body pulling was going to be a problem for her and why maybe she wasn't the favorite coming in, but she proved a lot of people wrong, and she will be a force to be reckoned with in Madison. And Tommy, you mentioned at the top all the newcomers here, but there were also some bounce back performances that we saw on the women's side.
Yeah, there was an interesting blend of a lot of athletes that are going to Madison that weren't there last year. You look at Emma Tall towards the top of the leaderboard. Illness knocked her out of semifinals last year, recapturing top form from a few years ago when she had to make it through the last chance qualifier. Manon Angoni's score submission knocked her out of the season last year. A few seasons ago, she was the national champ, had her invite revoked as a result of the shortened season. You go Ella Wunger, gradual improvement over time. She's improved at quarterfinals and semifinals each of the last 2 years. And then Rebecca Wittesen, she didn't qualify for semifinals last year. She nearly missed qualifying this year in 55th coming out of quarters. But really, she's a gamer. Get her in live competition. She has a ton of experience thanks to 2 trips to the games as a team. She would have had a third in 2020 with Butcher's Lab. I actually spent 8 hours in a Chinese airport with her stuck on a layover one time. Had to learn a little bit of her background, but she is an absolute gamer, has a ton of competitive experience in other sports too, and it's nice to see her climb back.
Let's go over to the men's side. They also close things out with 2 tests today, and in test number 6, Victor Hoffer is a guy who grabbed everyone's attention after the Open and then the great performance in quarterfinals. He came into the day in 27th place overall and saved his best performance for Sunday. He went out and dominated heat 4 of 6, sprinting through those pirouettes. He was first to the barbell on the final set of overhead squats. He would put up a time of 9 minutes, 34.11 seconds, and that would be good enough to win the test in Europe. Jonakowski started the day in 6th place overall, and he was close to Hoffer's pace in the 6th and final heat, but he would fall short by 5 seconds. Koski would wind up in 2nd place in the test. He moves up to 3rd place on the leaderboard. Then in test 7, Jelle Hoste. Look, no doubt that this guy is for real. He won the opening test of the competition, did Hoste, and then put the hammer down on test number 7. He has been inside the top 10 the entire weekend. Started Sunday in 4th place overall. He was way out in front by the time he got to his 2nd sandbag carry, cranked out his 15 calories on the bike, gets his 3rd test win of the competition with a time of 4:06.87 seconds. Now, Lazar Jukic winds up on top of the overall standings after 7 tests. He was extremely consistent. Only one finish outside the top 10, Tommy, and that was a 12th. He looks like he is ready to contend in Madison.
Yeah, and I think there's even an asterisk on that 12th place finish with a little bit of context. One of the storylines we talked about coming into the weekend was that this could be another step in a shift in the balance of power of Europe for the men, particularly between him and BKG. Now, honestly, Lazar did everything he could to make it a very big step in the shift in power, and his only blemish that you mentioned was a 12th, but it was in test 5, and the margins of that were so tight. About 1.5 seconds was the difference between Lazar in 12th and 8th place in that test, so really it's less of a concern overall. BKG deserves the credit for finishing and making it to the games for a 10th time. He's the best to ever do it in Europe, but Lazar right now is making a case to be the guy out there for the foreseeable future.
And Lauren, I mentioned Jelle Hoste, 3 test wins. And I'm going to give Tommy credit for this because he's the one who came up with this comparison. Hoste is sort of the European Brent Fikowski right now.
I love that we're calling him that. And like Brent Fikowski, if you're not getting to know Jelle Hoste, well, you have a couple of months to do so because he's someone you're going to want to keep an eye on in Madison. Last year didn't qualify or didn't head to a semifinal due to a video submission error. This year, he's going to the CrossFit Games as a rookie. Now, something that you do not expect from a rookie headed to Madison is 3 test wins over the course of the weekend. Test 1 almost earned himself an event record. Test 5 finishes sub 3. But then test 7, even with those long levers as he's hanging on for the toes to bar, he has to completely change his kip and takes home another event win. He's also a full-time engineer. He recently changed from a Mayhem athlete to now working with Andre Houdet. Incredible to see this performance. Somebody that you're going to want to keep an eye on, and just nothing that you would normally expect from a rookie. I'm excited to see what he does once we get to Madison.
Yeah, congratulations to the 11 men and the 11 women who qualified for the CrossFit Games out of the Europe semifinal. So let's turn our attention now to the other semifinal taking place. That was over in Asia. We start on the men's sside where Ardra Semenov and Morteza Sedegat, Tommy, hold on. They're heading to the games.
Yeah, and they had to overcome a shaky start, both of them with finishes of 15th place or lower on that opening day, sitting below the cut line. Thought we might see some new names, but really what the crux of their weekend came down to is how well they performed on day number 2. Between them, they took home 580 out of a possible 588 points that were up for grabs on day number 2. That is one of the best 1-2 punches as far as qualifiers are concerned that we've seen on those 3 tests. Now, Morteza did make it interesting because he finished 12th on that last test, a test that Ant Haynes won and brought it to within 15 points. But still, we get an established games athlete in Artur Semenov hoping to improve in year 2. And then obviously Morteza Setagot going for the very first time. So a nice little mix coming out of Asia.
And meanwhile, Lauren, for the women, Sarah Kaya works her way to the top of the overall standings. That's not a surprise there. And Shahad Boudebs takes that second spot. She's going back to the games.
That's right, Sean. And Kaya, she's somebody we expected to see atop of the leaderboard. But Shahad, she's returning to the games in a much different fashion than we've seen her previously. Back in 2019, she was a national champion. We saw her as an individual. Then 2021, she was on a team. But now going to the games with this format, I think really asserts herself as a dominant force to be reckoned with in Asia. She recently started training with the Underdogs crew, but then with the 6 weeks leading up to semifinals, she had a new training partner, Sarah Sigmundsdottir. This is the first time she's ever trained with somebody, so that extra push and confidence is probably what she needed heading into the semifinal. Something else that's worth noting is a huge part of her training was during Ramadan. So just think about that. For 30 days, no food, no water, how that affects your body in a lead up to a event of this caliber, I think really speaks to how good of an athlete she's going to be, especially in that region of Asia.
As I mentioned at the top, next stop, Madison, Wisconsin. The CrossFit Games, the next big thing on the calendar. They get going August 2nd through August 6th in Madison, Wisconsin. We will crown the fittest man, woman, and team on earth, and keep it locked here on our YouTube channel. If you haven't already, you can like this video and subscribe, turn on notifications. We'll have coverage all throughout the weeks leading up to the 2023 Noble CrossFit Games. You can also follow us on Instagram and support us on Patreon if you see fit. Thanks so much for watching, everybody. Big thanks to Lauren and Tommy and Brian Friend for taking some time out of their busy days to do this on a daily basis. Really appreciate you watching. For everybody here at Talking Elite Fitness, I'm Sean Woodland. Take care of each other, be better, and we will see you in Madison, Wisconsin for the 2023 Noble CrossFit Games.